Certainly appreciate WSU helping us do all of this because we probably could not do it ourselves. I know I couldn't. So thank you for coordinating all of this. Jeremiah, welcome to Kansas.
It's really nice to be here.
Good to have you here. I'm going to just read your brief bio that you sent me, and then I'll let you get started so I don't take up any more of your time. Jeremiah, or Dr. Weinstock, I'm used to calling him Jeremiah.
Please call
Dr.
me.
Weinstock is a licensed clinical psychologist, professor of psychology, and the chair of the Department of Psychology at St. Louis University, just over the river there. He's an expert in the assessment and treatment of substance-related and addiction disorders with over 65 peer-reviewed publications and funding from the National
Mom's not going to have her wheelchair.
And the International Center for Responsible Gaming. His primary scientific contributions include 1, refining our conceptualization, assessment, and treatment of gambling disorder, and 2, the use of contingency management in the treatment of substance use disorders. He has co-authored several scientific papers on cognitive behavioral therapy for the treatment of gambling disorder, and he maintains a small clinical practice focused on working with individuals diagnosed with gambling disorder. So I think we have the right person here to talk to us about our clinicians here in Kansas are used to treating problem gamblers, primarily casino type gambling. And now with the legalization of sports betting, which we're not sure when that will be enacted, if it will be yet this summer. The law was just passed, or if they're going to shoot for fall, or if they're going to wait and be smart and wait until January of 23. Which I doubt that they do. So what we're waiting on is the lottery to write the regulations about how this will all play out. And then Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission as well, writing their regulations since they oversee operations. So with that in mind, that's kind of where we are in the state and kind of where the clinicians are, even though some of them have seen individuals with who have problems with sports betting. It's either, coming from another state or doing it illegally. So I will turn it over to you and let you take it from here. And we're excited that you're here. And thank you for taking your time to do this for us.
No problem. Thank you, Carol, for having me, inviting me. It's really nice to be here and to talk about the next wave of gambling that's is spreading across America. You cannot watch a sporting event now without any sort of major advertising or heavy advertising relating to sports betting. Before we get started, I would love for you to let you know, please use the chat to put comments, talk to each other, say, oh, that makes me think of X, or this, I have a question about that. I'm going to ask Chad to kind of monitor the chat for me in the sense that if there's questions that people have, you can throw it in there and then Chad will interrupt me as we're going and he will post the question, because I do want this to be somewhat more interactive and not as much of me just kind of talking at you guys. And so please jump in with comments, ask each other questions, say hello to each other if you know each other. I think I recognize a couple people from the Midwest Conference on problem gambling and substance use back when we used to do in-person conferences. I'm hoping we can get back to that. If any of you may be traveling to NCPG in Boston this summer, I'll be doing it there, and I'm actually leading a 2-hour workshop with Dr. David Ledgerwood on, it's just a primer on cognitive behavioral therapy. I'll be talking a little bit of CBT towards the end of the presentation today. But I just want to start, you can either, let's use the raise a hand feature since some people are don't have their video on, but just give me, if you participated in any sort of high school athletics, primarily basketball, baseball, hockey, football, any of these sports that we are now betting on or about to be betting on, did you participate in any of those, at least through high school? So just show a raise of hands Anybody? You could use the raise a hand feature, any of that. All right, so we have a couple people. Chad did, Juan did. All right. How about do folks? Stephanie did. That's great. How about did any folks now actively watch sports now? Personally, I watch a lot of Cardinals and I've been watching a lot of Blues. I'm in St. Louis, of course. So we have a couple people raising their hands. So some people also may have some expertise now about these sports, thinking that, I kind of know something. And so that's one of the things I just want to start to say is a lot of America has contact with these sports either through playing or watching on a regular basis. And so there's some sort of expertise or skill that they may be thinking about. So I have a whole presentation. I'm going to share my screen. And so here we go. And does this look good for everybody? Just Chad, give me a thumbs up if that looks good and you're seeing the presentation side. Great. All right, so let's get started. So like I said, I'm Jeremiah Weinstock. Please just call me Jeremiah. I'm a professor at St. Louis University here in St. Louis. I've been here about 12 years, and prior to that, I worked with Dr. Nancy Petrie at the University of Connecticut Health Center. And then before that, I was at the University of Memphis working with Dr. Jim Whalen doing gambling work. I actually originally went to graduate school to become a sports psychologist because I was an athlete through high school and college, but I was a runner. But I was at Memphis and got involved in doing some gambling disorder treatment and found out that I really loved it. And so I've been doing that work ever since. I continue to see some gambling clients from time to time and have been doing a lot of gambling clinical trial work. So I've worked with a lot of gamblers, including some sports bettors. So here is what happened in Kansas. Your governor signed the law. It took several years for this to happen. But you do. And so let me just kind of walk through a couple of the basics. So when this does come live, I think Carol said that there's various timelines for potentially when this might happen. I think sort of the best guess that I've sort of heard through the newspapers, it's looking like November, December, potentially. Some sports apps like DraftKings and FanDuel have already started to line up agreements with different casinos in the state of Kansas. And they're just waiting for all the regulations to be put in place, and then they can put in their applications. And the state's supposed to move pretty quickly to approve those applications. So the legal betting age will be 21, and these include verification of your age. And so it really is somewhat rigorous to ensure that someone is 21 years old. There's a maximum of 12 online sports books that will be approved in Kansas. There'll be 4 casinos that will be approved to have these sports books. And each of them can engage 3 different sports books or app companies to provide sports wagering through their casino. Also, significantly, not every state does this, but betting on college sports is allowed. So you can bet on your Jayhawks if you so choose. And so that is a component of this. Not every state has allowed college sports betting because there's concerns around maybe these student athletes might begin to bet on themselves. And then there's concerns around point shaving and those sorts of things. What we do know about sports betting and sort of what goes on is there's actually a hot off the presses sort of poll that was conducted at Farley Dickinson University, just came out at the end of April, where they polled over 1,000 US residents and found that 24% of individuals who live in a state where gambling was legal, 24% placed a bet within the last 2 years. In states where gambling was not yet, sports gambling was not yet legal, the prevalence was 15%. So for example, here in Missouri, we don't have legal gambling and you guys don't either, but residents can go over to Iowa. Here in Illinois, we can go over to Illinois. They've had sports wagering. So all you have to do is for us here in St. Louis, we just have to cross the Mississippi and be physically located in Illinois, and we can play sports betting. Same goes on for what happens in Iowa. Also for the folks who are out west of Kansas, you can go over to Colorado as well. So it's really all around us, and it's only a matter of time. One thing that's really interesting, as there was another study that was recently came out, is an economic study. So this is just straight up about dollars, about what happened in West Virginia when they legalized sports betting. And what they found was that the revenues for slot machines actually decreased significantly, almost in a correlation with a increase in sports wagering. So almost, it's not dollar for dollar, but they found that there was a significant decrease in slots gambling because they hypothesized that many people switched over to engage in sports wagering. It also attracted new clientele as well. And so another example of how sort of just pervasive sports wagering is about to become in Kansas. Data from, this is recent data, so the 2022 Super Bowl, where it was Cincinnati versus the Los Angeles Rams. Boo, Stan Kroenke, by the way, we're not a big fan of here in him in St. Louis. He owns the Rams. They found that the per capita wagering in Colorado, so a neighboring state for Kansas, was per capita. So this is all adults, so 21 and older. The per capita wager on the Super Bowl was $9.12. But not everybody was betting on the Super Bowl, right? So if we restrict that to, let's say it's 25% of the population in Colorado bet on the Super Bowl, that meant the average bet was, $36, $37 on the Super Bowl for those who are wagering. But we know that's an average. Some people only bet 10 or 20 bucks, and there's lots of people who bet thousands of dollars. So there's going to be a real range in terms of what people are doing in terms of their sports wagering. All right, so let's talk about the goals of what I'm going to cover today. Number one, I really want to give you just a good idea of the different types of sport bets that people can make. It's really confusing when you first start to look at this, and the numbers make no sense at all. And so this is just to help give you sort of like the basics of how this stuff works and how the apps work, so that when a client comes in and starts talking about this, that you at least sort of have the basics of it. And I'll give you some referrals to some other resources as well. Next, we're going to kind of talk about in the States, what is sort of the demographic and clinical characteristics of individuals who are attracted to sports betting. All right. And a little bit also of what's associated with sports betting. And, the word I'll use here, it's not my ideal choice word, but problem gambling. So that includes both people who meet criteria for gambling disorder and some people who are subclinical. I do say that the individuals who are subclinical do warrant clinical attention. So that's why I use that problem gambling label and kind of look at the literature, the academic literature around what we know from about problem gambling. So I'm going to talk to you about who these individuals are, what it sort of looks like along those lines. And then lastly, we're going to get into the nuances and how you tailor both motivational interviewing and cognitive behavioral therapy in the context of sports betting. Because with each game, whether it be lottery, the mechanics are slightly different. The way people talk about their gambling is a little bit different. The way they experience their gambling is a little bit different. And so we're going to talk about that in terms of relationship, because that's exactly what you'll be doing down the road once this becomes legal, or you may already have somebody in your practice who's doing that. Can we just see, again, using the raise a hand feature, how many of you currently have a sports bettor in your clinical practice, or recently had somebody who was engaging in sports betting? You just use the raise a hand feature. Let's see if anybody has anybody. I'm seeing Stephanie has one or two. Thank you, Stephanie. So please, when we get to those components, speak up, talk about your client. I'd love to hear about that, because you have some rich detail and context to add along those lines. And other folks, if you have ideas and questions, please jump in along that way. All right. All right, so here's each of these apps and companies. So FanDuel and DraftKings are the two biggest companies. There are other ones out there like Bailey's, William Hill, sorry. These are all these different ones. And each of them, when you download the app or you go onto their website, they have a sports betting 101 that can walk you through a lot of these things. And some of the material I'm presenting today is I did some screenshots and pulled some details, and it's also from what I know from my clients. But if you want more details and you want to go through it more at your own pace, you can go find this stuff online. All right. So that's just the big resource at the end. So, all right. So let's talk next about the first thing is odds. These, and whenever you're gambling, right, all of our slot machines have odds, blackjack has odds, all these things. And so our, sports betting has odds. And so many times the odds are listed as a plus or a minus. So that's the first thing to do. So here's a screenshot from one of the apps. So this is what's called a Moneyline Bet, and we'll talk about what the Moneyline Bet is. But the odds are posted up in green at the top, and they're either posted as a plus sign, so plus 120, or a minus 120. And what that means is a plus sign means how much you are going to win if you bet $100. So in this case, if I bet on the Washington football team, all right, and they're now going to be called the Commanders, but the Washington football team, if I bet $100, I'm going to, and Washington football team wins, I'm going to win $120. So I'll get my $100 back, and I'll get another 120 put into my account. All right, that sounds great. On the flip side, the Washington Commanders are playing the Dallas Cowboys. It's a dreaded NFC East battle, two teams going at it. The flip side of the odds is that the Dallas Cowboys are listed as minus 120 on the Moneyline Bet. And the Moneyline Bet we'll get to in a minute. So there, what you have to do is you have to wager $120 to win 100. So you put 120 on the line, and if it comes back, you'll get $220 back. All right, 120 is your original wager plus the $100 that you won. All right, we can also simplify this. Let's say I just want to make a $10 bet. So I bet on the Washington football team to win, and I put $10 down, I'll win $12 back. So I'll get $22. Versus to win, get $22 back. If I bet on Dallas, I'm going to have to put $12 down to get $10 in winnings. Does that make sense to people about how this works? Please check in. Please say, no, like, explain that again. Tell me a different way, because this can get a little bit confusing, and we're going to start to make it more complicated as we go. All right. So the money line bet, that's the first sort of bet. That's the most straightforward one. It's basically you are betting on which team is going to win. You pick one and you place the bet. So it'll say on the app, if you go back to where we were here, is money line right there. You can see the red circle that says money line. And so that is the straight bet right there. All right. So there you're just picking winners and losers. You think, like, let's say you think, let's say you're a Dallas fan and you say, I know Dallas is going to beat the junk out of the Cowboys. I'm not going to worry about points. I'm not going to worry about any other little thing. I just think the Cowboys are going to win. So I'm going to put $12 back, and I'm going to get $10 in. Boom. All right. So that's one type of bet that you can make. The next bet is you can do a point spread bet. So a point spread bet is when you're going to wager by how many points you think your team is going to win or lose by. All right. So you can actually bet both winning and losing. So let's say in this example, so here's an example. This comes, you can do the money line bet here. Now the odds are a little bit different. You can see the money line is the middle column there. It's highlighted in green. The Washington football team is plus 160. So if I bet $100, what am I going to win if Washington wins at plus 160? Put it in the chat. How much money are you going to win? Before we get to the spread stuff, I'm doing a little knowledge check here. So if I bet on Washington football team and I put $100 in, and they win the game, how much money do I win? What's the money that I'm going to win? I'll get my $100 back plus what's my winnings? Throw it in there. So we had one person who threw 60. Keep going. 60. Yep. All right. Keep going. So we have another person says 160. All right. So it's 160 is the correct answer there. All right. If I put $100 down on the Washington football team just to win straight up, that's that money line bet. I would win and they win, then I'm going to get $260 back, my original $100 bet plus the $160 winning. Now the flip side, let's say I want to bet on the Cowboys. All right, and I want to win $100 from the Cowboys. How much do I have to put down? Do I have to risk to earn $100 in terms of winning? Throw that in the chat. If I want to win $100 on the Dallas Cowboys, how much of my own money do I have to risk using the odds here that's listed on the money line bet? So I want to make a guess. I'm not going to say a bet. So I want to make a guess about how much. The odds are minus 190. 290, 190. 190 is the correct answer. So I have to put $190 of my own money. So that's a lot of money just to win $100 because they think the Cowboys are going to cream the Washington football team. So the bigger the minus sign, the more money you have to put down to just win $100. Or I'd have to put down $19 to get $10. All right. So that's the way that works. Now we have this spread thing here. So there's two sets of minus numbers. So this really gets a little bit more confusing. The first minus number in the black font or the black ink is either +4 for the Washington football team or -4 for the Dallas Cowboys. That means we think in the spread, we think Washington is going to lose by, the bet is about 4 points. So you could make a bet and say, I think Washington, if you say, I think Washington, it's going to be a close game. So I'm going to bet on the Redskins, or they used to be called the Redskins, the Washington football team, they're going to lose the game, but they're going to be within 3 or more points. So it's going to be super tight. So I would bet it's a minus sign. So I'm going to have to bet $110 to win. And if the final score is 17-14 and Dallas wins, Dallas only won by 3 points, I still win that bet because it's within 4 points. All right. And if Washington football team wins the game and it's an upset, I still win the money too. Versus if I want to bet on the Dallas Cowboys with the spread, I think Dallas is going to win by more than 4 points, is what that bet there says over here. So that says -4, says, I think Dallas, you take their total points, you minus by 4. Do they still come out ahead in total points against the Washington football team? And I think, yes, they're going to beat them by a touchdown. They're going to beat them by 7 points. So I'm going to make that bet, but I have to throw down $110 to win $100. All right. So in this case, Dallas is favored to win by at least 4 points. All right. So Dallas has to win by 5 or more points for me to win that bet. All right. So there we have it in terms of what's going on. In some of the different sports, they will also talk about this in different ways. Instead of using the word spread, in hockey, they sometimes use the jargon puck line. So you just kind of have to know sort of what they're talking about depending on the sport that the individual is betting on in terms of all of that. All right. Do we have questions about how spread bets work? It's just the differences in sort of how much you're going to win or lose by, and you can make bets there. All right. So we have spread, we have money line. Now we have the next one are total bets, that column to the far right. Total bets are, oops, my thing is not advancing. Here we go. Total bets. Sometimes this is also called the over under. Total bets is basically in this football game, in this hockey game, in this basketball, what do I think is the total points that's going to be scored by both teams? If I add up team A score and I add up team B's score, this is what I think it's going to be over the total points. And so you can bet whether it's going to be over that number or it's going to be under that total number. So going back to our Dallas Cowboys and Washington football team club example, here the over, so O, we have this right over here, is that O right here. So that's over, that's what the O stands for, 48 points. So if both teams scored 24 points, that's 48 points, then therefore that's a tie, that's a push, you just get your money back. But if there's more than 48 points scored in the game, you have to bet $110 to win $100. And so if the score is 28-24, then what we'd have there is that would then be that would be the over. They scored more than 48 points, and so you would win that bet if you bet the over. You can also bet the under of 48 points. And so the 48 points here is saying, okay, I think it's going to be less than 48 points. I think it's going to be a low scoring game. I think it's going to be 21-14. So I'm going to bet the under. And so I have to put, again, that's minus 110. So I have to put $110 down to win $100, or I can put $11 down to win $10. And I'm going to make that bet. And if it comes in under 48 points, boom. And let me tell you that the way that they set these exact numbers is the sports books are just trying to generate the most volume of bets, because that's where they make their money, is they just want to get the highest volume of bets on there. So they make that over under 48. They'll make it so that there's a lot of action on both sides of the over and the under. Meaning there's a lot of people who think that number is wrong and they're going to bet the over. And there's almost as many people who are making that bet and saying, no, it's going to be under, because that's where they make their money. Is they want to not lose badly on one side or the other, because then they have to pay out a bunch of money. And so they just want to make sure that they're trying to do that. And so sometimes during the course of the week, the beginning of the week, they'll set out the over under or the spread or the money line bet. And then as more people are jumping in on one side or the other, they'll change the odds, all right, to generate more action on the other side, to kind of get everything 50-50 in terms of how much money people are placing on one side or the other of the bet, because they don't want to be out a bunch of money, right? And so they want to try to collect the largest volume of bets on both sides of the bet. All right, because every bet has two sides, and they want to make sure that they're getting enough money on the losing side to cover what they're going to get on the winning side. Does that make sense? So that is our total points or over under bets. All right, and the U is under there. That's U is right there. All right. Next up, now we have this thing called prop bets. These things are, now we're getting into what I get to say is a little bit more concerning, right? In terms of these bets are a little bit more, I don't know, just riskier. Let me just say that. So a prop bet is a bet that's not tied to the outcome of the game. It's not about who wins or loses, right? It's not about the Chiefs winning or the Jayhawks winning. It's about an aspect of the game or about a player's performance. All right. So an example of some game props are who will win, will the game go to overtime? Yes or no? You can bet on that. Does that seem like a smart bet? Like how many games go to overtime? Hockey, that's about the only one where there's actually a reasonable chance that it might go to overtime, right? All right. You can bet, will the team that scores first win, right? You can make that bet, right? So that's like a hockey bet, right? Or a football bet, yeah? Will the Chiefs have 3 or more penalties called against them in the first half? All right. It's getting a little bit odd, getting a little bit weird here, getting a little bit into the minutia of all these things. But you can make that bet, and there'll be odds where, the plus or minus, 120. All right. Maybe the Chiefs are getting called against, have a bunch of calls called in them against in prior history and past games. So you just know they're a team that is penalized. So you're like, that's a good bet. I'm going to make that. They're going to get 4, right? There's this one guy, offensive guard. He always gets called for holding, and he has a bad matchup, and so he's just going to hold the guy left and right. You can make those sorts of bets. There's also player props that you can make. So Zach Greinke is a pitcher for the Royals, and so you can bet on whether he'll have 7 or more strikeouts, and that's a minus 110 bet. So you have to bet $110 to win how much? You have to bet $110 and that minus 110 to win how much? Please throw it in the chat again. Someone said $100. Yep, tag, you're right. It's $100. Marisol, you're right. Yes, so you're gonna have to bet, and if he throws, and if you bet that yes, the over on is gonna be, he's gonna do more than seven or more. Boom, you win $100, right? Will Ryan O'Reilly have 2 or more assists? This is hockey, right? And that's a plus 130. So if you bet $100, you're gonna win 130 back. Next up is a basketball bet that prop bet you can make. And you can bet any stat that they collect. You can in basketball, the big stats are steals, assists, points, blocks. You can bet fouls if you want. These are all the things you can bet. So you can bet, here's a little bit of an interesting one. Will Jimmy Butler score less than 22.5 points? All right. Jimmy Butler can't score 22.5 points, right? He can score 22 or he can score 23. So that avoids any bet sort of tying, which means a push, and then you just get your money back. You don't win or you don't lose. The sports books don't want that to give people their money back. So that's why they set the points at 22.5. There's always going to be a winner and there's always going to be a loser. And they're just trying to maximize the bets on both sides. All right. And so, yeah, Jimmy Butler will score, less than 22.5. Boom. All right. So you can make a prop bet on that. Like you just think someone has a really bad matchup tonight, and so they're not going to score much. Jimmy, he's not going to score that. So I'm going to bet the under on that one. All right. So you can make those sorts of things. You can also make what's called futures bets. All right. Future bets is basically an outcome that's somehow in the future. The most famous example of a futures bet was, this was several years ago. I think this is like 2014 or 16. This was over in the UK, their Premier League soccer championship. There's a couple people, there's this team that is just down and out, never wins anything, right? They're just a terrible team. Sort of like your Baltimore Orioles in baseball, or your Cincinnati Reds, right? Just these terrible teams that never win. I'm sorry to be pooping on those teams, but they haven't won in a long, long time, right? So Leicester City was this terrible team. They're cellar dwellers, and a couple people made a bet that they were going to win the championship. They're going to win the Champions Trophy. They're going to be the number 1 team and all of that. And that's like some crazy bet. And somebody laid down a $50 bet. It's all in pounds, but it's like, but basically like this for simplicity's sake, he laid down a $50 bet with 5,000 to 1 odds. So for each $1 he's betting, he's getting $5,000 back. That's how big the odds are. He made this bet at the beginning of the season, and all of a sudden this team goes on a heater and starts winning. And everybody's like, oh my gosh. And this guy's like, oh, this is kind of cool. My bet might win. And he just made it on a lark because he's like, here's $50. I don't care. I'm going to put a bet on my team because I just love them and it'll be fun, and he didn't think it was gone. And all of a sudden they end up being the regular season champion, right? Is what happens with this team, right? And next thing they know, they're in the playoffs, right? And they're doing well. And all of a sudden the sports book is getting really nervous about this bet. All right. Because they're about to have to pay off a huge sum of money. So they go to the guy and say, hey, we want you to cash out right now. We don't want we're going to give you 50 grand if you just give it at the start of playoffs, because that's a lot more money than you think than you're going to earn. I mean, it's a lot more money than you think you would ever earn when you made this original bet, but it's a lot less money than they have to pay if it actually hits at the end of the year and they actually win. And the guy said, "Nah, I'm going to pass. I'm going to let it ride." And he goes another week or two, and they keep winning the next round of the playoffs. So finally, he didn't hold on to the ticket. He did what's called a cash out, and he won $72,000 on a $50 bet. All right. And so, but he got bought out. If he had held on and they did go on to win, he would have won, I think it's like $250,000. I think it's, if I'm doing my math right, I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. It's like $250,000. So that's kind of crazy. You can right now, if you were to drive over to Iowa or go over to Colorado, all right, people are just throwing in their credentials and names. That's great. So if you drove over to Colorado or over to Iowa and physically placed a bet there, you can bet on the Jayhawks winning the NCAA championship in 2023. That's a futures bet. And it's a plus 1,400. So if you put $100 down, then you would win $1,400 back. You could also bet on Kentucky, or you can bet on Houston. But since you're from Kansas, you're putting some money on your Jayhawks because you think they're going to win. All right. So do it right now. And come next April, you might be $1,400 richer. Or you might lose that $100 because the best player breaks his arm during a game and he's done. Right. And then, Bill Self doesn't have a team to stand by anymore. Right. So, that's a really risky bet, but you could make that bet, All right. So that's, again, you can make these future bets. They're all over the place for anything. You can bet on the Stanley Cup final. You can bet on the Super Bowl. You can bet on the World Series. You can bet on which team's going to win which division in baseball, hockey, football, any of these things, any future outcome. You can put some bets down. All right. Next up type of bet. Is everybody clear on these bets before I move on? All right. Next bet that we got is called Parlay Bets. I'm going to first play this ad. And so I'm going to play it 2 times. I'm not sure, oh, you know what? I have to stop the presentation for 1 second because when I shared, I did not check the share the sound sign. There we go. Now we're going back to where we were. Okay, now you can hear the sound of what I'm going to play when I play this thing. I'm going to play this 2 times. Yes, Chad.
Now we're seeing your a difference.
I pushed one. Thank you.
There you go. Yep.
All right, share the sound. There we go. All right, there we go. Good. Thank you, Chad. All right, so I'm going to play it 2 times. One is this. I want you to just kind of take in the information they're presenting. All right, this is the first time. Just take in the information. Notice at the bottom, gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. So this is also an ad that occurs in Pennsylvania. So or in New York. So that's where it takes. And so this is the DraftKings logo.
It's time. Combine multiple bets together within one game for bigger payouts. Introducing Same Game Parlay from DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a whole new ball game. Wait, no, it's not. It's the same game. Parlay. Now turn any game into a big game. Parlay your way with a risk-free bet up to $10 if your parlay doesn't hit. And make it rain.
All right. So that's their advertising. Introducing you to Parlay Bets. So Parlay Bets are where you bet on multiple aspects of a game or multiple aspects of some sporting event, or you bet on one aspect of one game here, you bet on the Cardinals versus the Brewers tonight, and then you bet on something about whoever the Royals are playing tonight, and then you bet on an aspect in another MLB game tonight, right? So you make these bets, and the way you win is if all three, or if you make 3 bets, all 3 of those bets hit, then you get a big payoff. I now want to have you watch this with a different lens. I want you to watch this ad again and think about how would an individual with a gambling disorder sort of view this ad? Is there anything in here that is trying to hook you? Any language, any features of what they're doing here? Think about it from your client's perspective. What would be attractive about this ad? What might bring out the desire or the urge to gamble after seeing this ad? All right, so let's just do that. And then I'm going to ask you for your feedback on what you think might be happening here.
It's time. Combine multiple bets together within one game for bigger payouts. Introducing Same Game Parlay from DraftKings Sportsbook. It's a whole new ball game. Wait, no, it's not. It's the same game, Parlay. Now turn any game into a big game. Parlay your way with a risk-free bet up to $10 if your parlay doesn't hit. And make it rain.
All right. So using the chat or a few things like that, jump in and say, what are some of the things that a client of yours who has a gambling problem might be noticing as they watch this ad? Or what's some of the things that the ad highlights that you think would be get your clients going or bring out that desire, that urge? Right? That risk-free bet at the end, right? There's big payouts, right? Right? And the dollar amounts on the tickets, right? Things are in green. I also think the music, right? It brings a lot of little energy, right? And it starts off, it's time, right? Bigger payout, big game, right? And so these risk-free bets is actually, that's sort of like, when you go to the casino and they comp you different things. So that's basically a comp that's now being offered. And so you can make a $10 bet. And if your bet loses, they'll give you $10 back in your account. You can't withdraw that money and take it and put it in your pocket and go spend it somewhere else, but you can then use it to make a different bet. All right. And so that's another thing like that. So these promo codes, things like that are happening all the time. All right. So yes, there are these things that go on. And so I just want you to pay attention to that, because this advertising is very different from the advertising that you see for casino advertising, right? There, it's all about the experience of luxury and escape, right? And a little bit of the excitement too, but this is sure here, this is pure straight adrenaline, right? That's what they're going for. And to create that urgency and that sort of also good, fun, lighthearted time. And also you're gonna make some money. Getting at those financial motives, right? All right, we've seen that, I've played that. So the Parlay Bets is placing a bet on multiple outcomes that will occur. And in order to win the parlay bet, all those outcomes must be correct, or you must win on each of these individual bets, all right? So parlay bets are high risk, high reward. Do you know anybody who likes to make high risk, high reward bets? You don't have a couple clients here or there who might be engaged in all that sort of thing, right? And so parlay bets are actually somewhat common among individuals who have a gambling problem. And here's an example of what one looks like. So this is a screenshot. I grabbed it from somewhere where somebody actually won on each of these bets. So recent one, this is all basketball related. So, and this is this is the Dallas Mavericks versus, I think, Golden State. I'm not a huge basketball fan, but I think this is what this is all about. So Luka Doncic is going to make more than 3 3-point shots. That's the first bet that the person has right here. All right. The next bet is that Reggie Bullock, he's going to score more than 15 points. Yep, one on that one. Also, that Reggie's going to make more than 4 3-point shots. He did that, apparently. Steph Curry is going to be under 25.5 points. All right. He scored 20 points. So that bet won too. All right. Steph Curry under 3.5 on 3-point shots. Yep, he only made 2. Check. Dallas Mavericks are going to win by 1 to 10 points. Check. And this player, Luka Doncic, he's going to score 30 points or more. Check. Person made a $5 wager. And if everything hit, which they did, he won she won $337.64 off a $5 bet. All right. Kind of scary, right? What do you think is happening to this individual as he's watching the game? What's the experience of watching this game versus the person who just put the money line bet on the Mavericks to win? Me, if I'm not a big NBA fan. I personally think I like college basketball, but NBA is like just turn and watch, just turn on the last 5 minutes and see who wins, right? But what do you think is going on for this individual for that? They're getting more excited with each bet, right? Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. They're into it, and they have to keep track of all these different things. They got to keep track on Steph Curry, on Reggie Bullock, on Luka. They want to make sure the final points are all this. It's crazy, right? He's going up and down with each basket, with each 3-point play. Can you imagine what that feels like? How many little hits of dopamine that person is getting? Isn't that part of the addiction? Right? Right. And oh, by the way, and the money piece, never mind, because for a lot of our gamblers, it's not necessarily about the money, right? For our slot machine players and our lottery players, it's not so much about that. It's more about the Calgon take me away. It's the escape, right? With sports betting, it is completely a different beast. It is about the action. It's about the excitement. It's about all these little things and watching that and just going up and down. And it's a roller coaster and it's brutal, right? It's exhausting. And this is never mind with the preoccupation that happens before they're actually making the bets. They're studying things and they're going through things and they're looking at all these different YouTube channels of what are the smart plays for tonight's game. I mean, there's people who have huge following on YouTube and they're basically sports betting handicappers. So people who kind of are supposedly experts and they make some suggestions, So I had somebody I know who's a sports bettor who has a gambling problem. Is a client of mine who came in. This is relatively recent, and he was following this one sports handicapper, and the guy would say, okay, and this is college basketball, and the guy would say, okay, make these over under bets, and there's these teams have always covered their spread in the last 10 games, so these are the teams you want to bet on. And it was, and I forget what the name of the university was, but there was this one university where it's there's Miami University, which is in Ohio, and then there's the University of Miami, which is down in Florida. And so my client was so just kind of frantic to get the bet in. He went through and he made the bet on the wrong University of Miami, right? And University of Miami, and it was Miami University, which apparently I'm making that up. I'm not sure if it's that same as that school, but just for the purpose of the example. And it was the wrong bet. And actually Miami University was a terrible bet. And it was so bad, right, that he was convinced he was going to lose this bet. And then all of a sudden at the end of the game, they covered the bet and he ended up winning all by accident because he bet the wrong team. And he was just he went from the worst dread that he could ever experience because he made a quick, stupid mistake in his mind. And it comes out and he wins. And he's like, oh my gosh. And he's like, yes, I'm the smartest man. I did all this stuff right. Right. And it was just dumb luck. Right. And so he didn't really necessarily learn much from that experience. Right. So I was going to say something about that studying. People can feel more skill and expertise. Exactly. Because they're spending time on it and they're investing in it. Or maybe they played that sport, so they sort of kind of know something that the average Joe doesn't know. So they're smarter, right? And so they can predict what is happening, right? So yeah, Miami's in Florida or Ohio, and there's a couple other universities that also all have that sort of dual names, and they got to go things along those lines. So parlay bets, you can get really down in the weeds and really crazy with it, all right? And it's a lot of action and excitement or dread and bad juju if you're not having a good night, right? No, but there's always tomorrow night, right? You can always bet. And by the way, it's all on your phone. It's all just right here. I can open it up. Heck, I could be betting right now as I'm talking to you, and you would have no idea. And lots of our gambling clients who are sports bettors, they'll be doing that. They'll go to a restaurant for like a family celebration, someone's graduation or anniversary. And they're like, oh, I got to go to the bathroom. And they'll run in the bathroom and they'll make their bet, or they'll go check their scores. And then they'll come back out. And the family will have no idea what's going on. None whatsoever. Right? All right, next one. This is, and we're getting to the more riskier stuff now. This is the stuff that I feel like is the most risky and the most dangerous for our people with gambling problems. And this is the live or in-game betting. So in-game betting is about betting on different aspects of the game as they happen in real time. All right, so example is you can bet on which team you think is going to score next. You can bet on which team might have a penalty called next. You can bet on which player on the Blues is going to score the next goal. Or you can bet whether, let's take the Royals. There's whether Zach Greinke, I don't know a lot of the Royals players, but you can bet on whether Zach Greinke is going to strike the next batter out or not. You can bet yes or no. Or you can bet whether the guy coming up to bat is going to get a hit, right? Yep. Yeah, there's a client who bet on during breaks at work, right? It's all right there on action, and it's 2-3 presses of a button on your phone and boom, the bet's made. As long as the money's in the account. All right. So you can make these bets ongoing. You can make there's an updated over under. So the total score, you can do that. Or you can have an updated point spread of how much they're going to win or lose by, right? So you can do all that. You can also bet first team to a specific number of runs in baseball. You say, I think the Cardinals or I think the Royals are going to get to 3 runs before the Seattle Mariners, right? So you can bet that, right? Or yes or no, the next player will get a hit or a strikeout, right? You can make those bets, right? So let's imagine a scenario where you have a client and they made some opening bets for a game, and like it is going horribly awry, right? Those bets are like, they are not looking like they're going to win at all. And so all of a sudden, this person's now down $200-300. What do our people do when in that situation? What do our gamblers do? It's a diagnostic symptom that they are down $200-300. What do they do to get that money back? They chase their losses, right? And so instead of waiting the next day to go back and try to win that money, they can do it right now, right here, and make some in-game betting. All right. So that's also a sign of loss of control, right? They can make all these sorts of different bets. All right. And also the duration between when making a bet and its outcome now is much shorter. I can bet on the next batter. What does that do for my do to dopamine in my brain? And either I win or I lose, right? If I win, I get that little dopamine shot like, oh man, I was right. I knew it. It was going to happen. I knew that guy was going to get hit. He was just due. He's hot, right? Or this pitcher stinks. I know he's just going to light him up like a Christmas tree, right? So you can do that sort of stuff, right? And so there's a lot of impulsivity, chasing losses, just overall loss of control, all right? So there's all those sorts of things that go on with live or in-game betting. I think this is really a dangerous product that they're offering. And so I really am just wanting these things to go away. Unfortunately, the genie, the toothpaste is already out of the tube. You can't put it away now. I mean, I'm going to give you another example. This was last night. I saw this last night. I was watching the Blues game. It went to overtime. The Blues tied it up with a last minute goal, right? And so these are the updated odds of the game between intermission between the third period and overtime. So this was just the advertising that popped up on my TV, DraftKings Sportsbook. Meanwhile, betting is not legal in Missouri, but yet this is on the national broadcast on TNT. All right. So this is live in-game betting that you could make. New customers bet $5 to win 100, no matter what. I want $100. Don't you? Can't you think of what you'd do with $100? I mean, I'm going to buy myself a nice Cardinals ticket. Sit pretty down close, right? I mean, I don't know. I would do something, right? Or maybe if I'm a sports wager, we know that sometimes we like to drink too. Sports wagers, right? They like to drink a little bit. Maybe I'm going to buy a really nice bottle of scotch for $100. We can get something really nice, right? All right, so you gotta use the promo code SKATE. All right. When you're looking at this advertising, now that you know what plus 130 and minus 170 mean, what's deceptive or tricky about this advertising? So the first thing is, who will win? St. Louis plus 130. Colorado, if you bet on Colorado, it's minus 170. But yet the box to the right says what? Box to the right says bet $100 and it pays out $230. That's only for this bet. They're only highlighting this bet. They're not highlighting this. Bet $170 to win 100. Right? Isn't that a little deceptive? Isn't that a little like marketing 101? So I could have jumped on my phone immediately if I had the DraftKings Sportsbook app and I lived in a state where it was legal. I could have jumped on and immediately done this. All right. All right, there's some other kinds of bets that are not super common that also clients can make. There's like, they call them teaser bets and some other ones. I'm not going to go through on that one because those aren't super common, but just know that they're out there and you can find them on those Sportsbook 101 gambling sort of websites where you can go through it if you need to learn about those. All right. So there is that. So now let's talk about how these apps work. So first off, you got to download the app onto your phone. In Nebraska, they actually did not legalize mobile sports wagering. So you have to go into one of the 6 or 7, I think it's 6 horse tracks in Nebraska. Kansas, they legalized it on your phone. So you can do that, or you can go into the one of the 4 casinos and make a physical bet too. You can go in there and pay straight up cash. All right. Then, but if you download the app, then you have to create your account and verify your identity. You got to provide them with a bunch of information. You also have to scan in your ID. So you got to take a picture of your driver's license or passport, and then you put it in there. All right. Then you deposit money via credit card, bank account, PayPal, Venmo. They have lots of ways that they'll take your money. You think of a way, you can even mail in a check. All right. And then it'll be there. You can take a picture of a check. You can write a check, take the picture, upload it to their site. Then they'll give you the money. I mean, it's like just like that. All right. Then you start making your wagers and they have an account and you'll go up and down and they'll pay out. And then you can have, then you can withdraw your winnings. And the rules really vary by state. And there used to be, and I don't know how Kansas is going to do it. That's part of what the lottery has to do with the regulations. Some states have some rules about how much you can withdraw within a 24-hour period. So if you hit a big winner, let's say you win $10,000, but they have a rule where you can only withdraw $2,500 a day. What do you think happens with that remaining $7,500 that's sitting in the account there with the person with the gambling problem? They have to wait till tomorrow to withdraw another $2,500. But what do you think they do instead of waiting the next day to draw? What do our clients do? They bet it out, right? Because they're like, well, if I can just get back to even, I'm down 10 grand. If I can just get back my 10 grand, I'm done. It's over, right? They say that, but then they go to withdraw and they can only withdraw $2,500, so they can't get it out. And that $7,500 is sitting there, and it's like a siren. It is just calling their name, Jeremiah, make that bet. Come on, it's just sitting here. Oh, look at that bet. It's a guaranteed winner, right? It's calling their name. They can't escape it. And boom, they lose that $7,500 and they're just back in the hole, back chasing all their laws, things like that. All right. So I don't know what Kansas's rules will be, but that is something that you do want to get yourself educated on, know the deal about how all that works. All right. These gambling apps, also the sports betting apps, do have some responsible gaming features. You have to go find them and you have to go turn them on. That's one of my little pet peeves that I would love to see happen. Is there's this whole field of what's called behavioral economics, where they say basically the default choices in the world make a big difference and govern our behavior. The best example of that, they talk about default choices, is retirement accounts. If you are an employer that automatically enrolls you in like a 403B or 401k, and they automatically say, okay, we're going to put in 2% of your salary into a retirement account. It's like over like 90% of people then therefore elect to have a retirement account and have money taken out of their paycheck. But when it's that's opt out, versus opt in is if you start the job and they say to you, the HR person says, would you like to start your retirement and start to contribute to that? The people who do that, it's only about 50% people enroll in retirement accounts and then contribute to a 401k. So basically, it's set. What we say then is that's behavioral economics says is that's opt in and versus opt out. And so I would love for these responsible gaming features to be opt out. That when the first time you download this app, they come with some limits already preloaded and in place, whether that be deposit limits, wagering limits. So how much of maximum size of bets, maximum bet, time limits. So session limits on the amount of time you can spend. You can also do what's called a timeout that basically says that I'll be on the app for an hour, but then I have to wait, and you can set how long you have to wait before you can get back onto the app. All right. So, and then you can also do self-exclusion. It is possible, and it's unclear how Kansas will do it. But because Kansas has, there could be up to basically 12 different companies offering these sports wagering sports books. That might be 12 different apps that you have to go in and do this. And let me tell you, the people with gambling problems bet across multiple different apps and sports books because they're always looking for the latest and greatest promo code, and they're trying to maximize it all there. So they bet across many different platforms. So I would love to see these responsible gaming limits kind of set to what we know are the limits, the low risk limits that have been really developed primarily out of Canada around sort of what it is. And, it's not a lot of money. It's not a lot of time. But then these sports books are not going to make their money. And so they're very much opposed to this sort of thing. All right. So at this point, we are about a little over an hour into our presentation. This really concludes what I had to talk about in terms of how the wagering works and these apps. Okay. The next sort of piece that I want to run into now is demographic and clinical characteristics. All right. So this is just a little comic. The guy's reading Casey at the Bat to his kid, and he then talks about the odds. All right. So here's the demographics of who is likely to engage in sports wagering. So individuals who gamble on sports have double the prevalence rate of developing a gambling disorder compared to other gamblers. This comes from the National Council on Problem Gambling, and where they did some looking at that sort of things. Who's likely to place a sports wager? Young adults, generally 35 years of age or younger. Generally people who are individual and educated and single. We also found, and this is from a recent Fairleigh Dickinson University poll, that Blacks or African Americans and Asian Americans are more likely to engage in sports betting than whites or Caucasians. All right. And that's in states where it's legal and illegal. Here's another little demographic. This breaks it down by age 45 and younger. And it's 23% of people age 45 and younger have made a sports bet in the past 2 years, versus when you get older than that, it's like 10%, 9 or 10%. All right. So it really skews that younger demographic and slightly more likely to be non-white in terms of what's going on here. All right. Individuals who play sports wagering have a social network that's engaging in sports wagering. All their buddies are also doing it, or several of their buddies. They're also really likely to bet across multiple apps or platforms. So they'll have a FanDuel's account. They'll have a DraftKings account. They'll have a William Hill account or a Bailey Sports or a Fox Sports account. There's all these different companies. And so they're always looking for the latest promo code or whatever, a little cash back, risk-free bet. They're just kind of always looking to kind of maximize what it is. And the free money bets and the guaranteed no winner, the harm minimization sort of bets, are more attractive to our individuals with gambling disorder compared to the ones that give you a little boost to odds or things like that. All right. Alcohol co-use is common. 73% of weekly sports bettors said that they made a bet while they're intoxicated. And we make great decisions when we're under the influence of alcohol, right? we make lots of really good decisions, right? And we find that individuals who are under the influence of alcohol, they make larger bets and they make great bets at greater frequency when they're drinking, right? So here's the image of a sports book. You know, and there's lots of booze, there's hot wings, there's food, and there's all these TVs where you can follow every little thing, right? In time, Kansas didn't do this, but other states have done this where they've legalized the sports book to be in the stadium. So where at the Washington Capitals and the Washington Wizards, that's basketball and hockey, they're owned by the same guy, and there's a sports book in the stadium. You can imagine that someone may make some bets about the game before they start, and that bet starts to go, horribly awry, and it's not looking like it's going to be a winner. And they go do some live action, live in-game bets right downstairs in the building as the game's going on to try to chase their losses and come back, right? I personally think that that's going to lead to all sorts of bad news things, right? Also, compared to problem gamblers who are not sports bettors, but more are slot machine and lottery players and cards, their sports bettors are more motivated by financial goals, also a desire from social interaction, and also these self-esteem boosts, right? Because I'm an expert, I just proved how smart I am because I won, right? So there's that big self-esteem boost that's going on. So we have that sort of action going on. Any comments or questions about what we know about the clinical characteristics of individuals with who are sports bettors and have gambling problems? All right. Kansas did legalize kiosks and sport arenas. Really? Wow. I didn't know that, Carol. Thank you for putting that in there. So when you're going to Sporting KC game, you can go in there and make a bet. All right. So you can do some soccer bets.
Yeah, we only have the one professional team, and that's why there's a huge push to get the Kansas City Chiefs to cross from Missouri into Kansas.
Well, that's what the law did. So the law in Kansas, basically they set aside 80% of the tax revenue to attract professional sports teams to Kansas.
Yes.
Yep. And they're primarily seeking to get the Chiefs. I'm really curious to see how Missouri legislature is going to respond to that, because we haven't passed our sports wagering law. The legislature doesn't quite care about sports in Kansas City and St. Louis, but with a direct sort of competition thing, I think there'll be some sort of traction, and we'll just have to see how that all unfolds. I think that's a really interesting sort of dynamic that gets into a whole different area. All right. So next up, now let's talk about treatment and how this all works. All right. And so this is my little cartoon here about gambling treatment. You can see for this individual, unfortunately, it's not going very well. All right. So I want to talk about motivational interviewing first, because I want to set up a case example that I have, and I'm going to ask you kind of go through and think through with me, how are you going to do this motivational interviewing with a person with a sports betting problem? So just, many of you are steeped in all this. I just didn't want to assume. So I just put some basic information about motivational interviewing, or MI. MI is a very collaborative conversation style for strengthening a person's own motivation and commitment to change. That's a definition that comes out of the MI book. All right. So constructive behavior change seems to arise when the person connects it with something of intrinsic value, something important, something cherished. So to reduce their gambling is tied to something they cherish or a value or part of their identity. I'm a good parent, so that means I'm not on my phone gambling my life away, being something like that. Intrinsic motivation for change arises in accepting and empowering the atmosphere that makes it safer for a person to explore the possibly painful present in relation to what is wanted or valued. All right. So that's the other. It's just this non-judgmental style about exploring how their current behavior matches up with their values and goals. All right. We do this through. I'm going to jump ahead, and I'm going to come back to this. We do this by expressing empathy for our clients. We do this also by just developing discrepancy between their current behavior and their values and their goals. Again, eliciting and drawing this information out of our clients. We want to roll with resistance when we encounter that. Because we want to be non-judgmental, and we really want to support self-efficacy, or basically the client's belief in change and confidence in themselves. All right. And lastly, the methods, the client therapist behaviors are open-ended questions, affirming, reflecting back what the client's saying to amplify it, all right, and summarizing this. This is abbreviated as ORS. And lastly, part of the methods is really to focus on this darn cat sort of thing. You want to look for, when a client is saying things, you want to look for these sorts of things and amplify the situation. All right. So we're going to come back to this in a minute. I want to come back now. I have a case study that I want to share with you. And I'm just going to read this case study. All right. And what I'd like for you to do is I'm going to tell you this case study. And I just want you first to listen to the story and listen to what are the similarities to people with a gambling problem who are not sports bettors, to the clients that you know and work with already. And then what are some of the differences you hear in this story? All right. And this is about, and I want to give you a little bit of context. This person is talking about the World Cup soccer match back from, I think this is 2014, Brazil versus Germany. And Brazil was the huge favorite to win this game. All right. So this comes from, by the way, the story comes, I frequent or sort of lurk on, there's that website called Reddit, and it's where people can post stories and comments and things like that. It's a big kind of message board. And there's actually a problem gambling message board specifically for people who identify with problem gambling. So this is a post that someone put up one day about this. All right. So here's the person's story. Now I want you to just look for the similarities and differences between your non-sports betting gambling clients. So I've been lurking for a while here, but this is my first time posting here. So I'll give you some backstory. I started sports betting about 7 years ago. It started off innocuous enough. After college, my buddies and I started doing an annual trip to Vegas for the first weekend of the NCAA tournament every year. Those trips were always fun and social, and I was pretty good about sticking to a small budget. Then I opened an online account, and for a long time, that was under control too, $5 or $10 here or there on games I was watching with friends anyway. Things started to change maybe 18 to 24 months ago. I think my experiences was pretty typical. I hit several big, for me at that point, bets in a row. And suddenly I was up a couple grand and very hooked. I would set some arbitrary dollar amount I needed to hit before I cashed out. And then when I got there, I would just move the goalposts. Well, you won't be surprised to hear that eventually my hot streak turned cold and I lost all of my winnings. Remember Germany 7, Brazil 1, this huge upset. I was the guy on my phone in the hotel bar, doubling down on the in-game under every time Germany scored. I was just so angry and disgusted with myself, but I felt like I could let it go if I just won back everything I had lost. Well, I didn't. I just kept digging a deeper and deeper hole. Now my goal was just to get back to even. I wasted weeks analyzing, obsessing over, and watching games, but I wound up down about $5,000. Then I finally hit the hot streak I've been waiting for, and I got all the way back to even, to the point where I promised myself again and again I would cash out and move on with my life. Of course I didn't cash out. I somehow convinced myself that since I was really dialed in, whatever that means, I should keep going and actually make some money. Shockingly, that didn't work so well. Instead, I lost it all again. Even more disgust, shame, anger this time. And it was even harder to focus on anything else in my life other than winning that money back. Fast forward to the beginning of October, I'm now down $12,500 overall. I decided to try another deposit, one last shot, LOL. And I catch another heater, turn $250 into $13K in about 2 weeks. This is 2 weeks of obsessive, round-the-clock, nail-biting, degenerate mode, mind you. I finally hit my magical cash-out number. I'm retired from gambling, right? Minor wrinkle, though. My sports book only allows me to cash out $2,500 at a time, and you have to wait 6 to 8 weeks for a withdrawal to arrive before requesting a new one. Convenient for them. So I request one, but I still have $10K burning a hole in my account. I lasted 2 days. Then the same exact story. I placed a couple small bets. They hit, so I started pressing a little. I went up 3K, then lost 7K, all within 36 hours. The next day, I promised myself if I could just get back to the magical cash out number, I'd actually quit. So I got back to my number, and next morning I'm betting on a bunch of Champion League shit I have no idea anything about. I'm back down 2K by dinner time. This morning I made myself the same promise. Get back to the number and I'll quit. Well, I got back again, but I overshot a little. Can't leave that alone, right? So I've got a few bets pending as I type this. Here's the thing. Even if I were actually to quit after tonight, something I have no confidence in whatsoever in my ability to do, gambling has seriously screwed up my life. Even if I'm able to cash out what I have, so there's no short-term financial damage, it's ruined my shit in a lot of other ways. I'm anxious and depressed, irritable all at once a lot of the time. I'm not sleeping because I'm up until the latest game ends every night, usually drinking and or smoking as well. Usually need time to cool down, read, plan tomorrow morning's bets, after the last game ends. I've been short-tempered and distant with my wife and kids, which is something I absolutely hate about myself. I've let all my actual hobbies and interests languish. I used to be a very outdoorsy person with lots of hobbies and some close friends. I've always liked sports, but I've always preferred playing them to watching them on TV. I passed up countless opportunities to play basketball, soccer, hockey with friends, to gamble on complete strangers playing those games instead. All I've done for the last 18 months essentially is fulfill my bare minimum obligations to my job and my family so that I can spend the rest of my time obsessing about gambling. Even when I'm out with families, friends, coworkers, I'm glued to my stupid Flash Score app, obsessing over my bets. And here's the real kicker. If I somehow manage to hang on to what's in my account long enough to cash it out, I will have at least dodged the short-term financial blow, but not in the long term. I'm in grad school. When I go on the job market in a year or two, whether I get a good position depends almost entirely on how much research I've published. All the time I've spent on gambling, and it's been more than a full-time job the last 1.5 years, it's time that I could have and should have spent on research. The difference between a good job and a not so good job, or no job at all, could easily be hundreds of thousands, if not millions, over the next 30 plus years. But I've been so obsessed with salvaging a couple $1,000 that I've completely ignored the big picture, which is shitty for me, but also unfair to my family. All right, that's his story. So what are some of the similarities that you heard there in his story? You can unmute yourself to just jump in and say some things. So please just unmute yourself. What are some of the similarities here?
Out of control.
Yeah,
Chasing losses.
chasing the losses.
Preoccupation.
Yeah, preoccupied. Staying up late, playing the next morning's bets.
Relationship problems.
Right? Mm-hmm. So in these many ways, things are really similar. And these are things you are already very well steeped and know how to do, right? How to handle and how to talk to your clients about. That's pretty simple, straightforward. There's anything that you caught that was slightly different? Something a little different. I hadn't heard that one before, or, wonder how we talk about that.
For me, it was the limit that he could withdraw and the temptation that was there that you don't see in other forms of gambling.
Right? That is the thing that I think that in in-game betting is so problematic, right? Yeah. And he had to wait 6 to 8 weeks to do it again. I think many states are better about that now, because there is a sort of a consumer sort of orientation, but it's still there. Some states do have some limits, and some states also, it just may take, 2 or 3 days for that money to come out, It's instant to get in, but not instant to get out. I think those are some of the bigger, that is the sort of one big difference. The in-game betting too that he did, that was another big difference. So at World Cup, Germany 7, Brazil 1, and he kept on doing updating his over-under bet. So that's a little bit crazy. Mm-hmm. All right. So those are some of the similarities and differences there. All right, I'm now going to go back and we'll advance the slides now. Let me get back to that part. So, all right. So now we're talking about motivational interviewing. All right, I want you, I'm going to read this again, but this time I want you to look for darn cats. All right, I want you to look for these things. And I'm going to read it a little bit slower because I want you to unmute yourself and jump in as if this was actually a dialogue between you and a client. And I'm going to be the client here. I'm going to be reading and saying some of these statements. And I want you to jump in with what would you do during the MI session to reflect back to me, to amplify some of the things I'm saying, or to deepen my understanding. So just jump in with what you would say as a therapist if a client was saying these sorts of things, okay? So I'm just gonna slowly read this and just unmute yourself. There's no, by the way, there's no judgment here on what you're saying. I just want you to have that MI hat on for a second and say, okay, what would be a place where I could interject with a reflection that might amplify some of the things he's feeling? All right. So I'm going to read this just really slowly, not how it naturally happened. All right. I'm just gonna say, all right, I'm just gonna pick up. So I started sports betting about 7 years ago. I started innocuously enough. After college, my buddies and I, we started going to Vegas for an annual trip to the NCAA tournament. The trips were always fun, social. Sorry, I didn't do that. Social, small bets to stick into my budget. Then I opened an online account. And for a long time, that was under control too, $5 or $10 here or there on games I was watching with friends anyway. Does anybody want to offer a reflection here? Anybody want to offer a reflection? So it started off innocently enough. Wouldn't that be a nice sort of reflection sort of thing? Things started to change maybe 18 to 24 months ago. I think my experience was pretty typical. I hit several big for me at that point, bets in a row. And suddenly I was up a couple grand and very hooked. Anybody want to offer a reflection there? How about a nice, simple reflection?
You were enjoying this, and it seemed to be going well until
Right.
that last thing occurred.
Yeah, I was like, it was just totally innocent, right? You're just amplifying what I'm saying and saying, yeah, it was started off just fine. It's totally innocent. I would set some arbitrary amount that I needed to hit before I cashed out. And then when I get there, I would just move the goalposts. Well, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that eventually my hot streak turned cold and I lost all my winnings. It turned south for you, didn't it? Would that be a nice, simple reflection?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have any ideas of things they could say, something different? Mm-hmm. All right. Remember Germany 7, Brazil 1? I was the guy on my phone in the hotel bar, doubling down on the in-game under every time Germany scored. I was just so angry and disgusted with myself, but I felt like I could let it go if I just won back everything I had lost. What am I feeling or what am I expressing there? Just give me reflect back that feeling I'm giving.
Feeling the frustration because you're trying to get back, you're trying to chase your losses and trying to get back to where you were at least before.
Yeah, I just couldn't let it go. You were committed, right? That's another thing you could say, right?
But you've had one in the past So there was a chance you were going to win.
Yeah, that was my thinking at the time. There was a chance. You know, there's always a chance, right?
Right.
You know, one of my favorite lines is as a gambling therapist, the one of the things I love to say to clients, right? I talk to them about is, you know, my job is actually to take away hope, in the hope that you're going to hit the big one. My job is actually also to instill hope that you have a better future by reducing or stopping your gambling. That's my job, is to take away hope on that gambling is going to solve your problems, but I'm also here to instill hope about your future. So anyway, that's my little aside there. All right. Well, I didn't just kept digging a deeper and deeper hole. Now my goal was just to get back to even. I wasted weeks analyzing, obsessing over and watching games, but I wound down about $5,000. What do you want to amplify there? I wasted weeks analyzing, obsessing over and watching games, but I wound down over $5,000. What's the thing that you want to amplify back to me? Because what do you want to push me to?
In spite of all of your efforts and the best education you could give yourself, you still couldn't let go and just walk away.
Yes, Emily, I couldn't let go. I mean, I was pouring my heart and soul into this, and I'm down $5,000. How much does that hurt? Nice reflection there. Thank you. Then I finally hit the hot streak I had been waiting for, and I got all the way back to even, to the point where I promised myself again and again I'd cash out and move on with my life. Of course, I didn't cash out. I somehow convinced myself that since I was really dialed in, whatever that means, I should just keep going and actually make some money. What do you want to amplify in that sort of stretch? Look at our darn cats. Is there anything in there? Or anything that you want to marinate me in my distress is the other thing I talk about when we're doing MI. Is you want to marinate people in their distress. Use their own words and just reflect it back to them. So you convinced yourself that this was going to be different than the last times. Or you say, I think I know where this story is going. Right? That's another thing to say to a client. I think I know where this story is going. All right. But you guys get the idea here about how we should, reflect and really push our clients to do this. All right. And so that's really the point of this exercise here. For the sake of time, I'm now going to move on because we have a lot more territory to cover, and we only have about a half hour left. And I really want to get into talking about CBT and then some of the nuances around CBT with all these sorts of things. All right. So again, I know you guys are all very steep therapists, but I want to assume nothing just in case there's some therapists who are very early in their experience here. So just bear with me as I do the quick review of CBT. So CBT, this is the classic model where I always put my fingers up in a triangle when I'm teaching clients this. They say, okay, CBT is all about how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, how they're interchanged, how one is connected to the other. The more classic cognitive behavioral therapy, like the Beck sort of CBT, that's more more cognitive than that, is we also have our core beliefs about our thoughts, ourselves, others, and the future. All right. And so that's what the CBT model is. And really when you're working with CBTs, you want to look at how our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors relate to these core beliefs. And these core beliefs sort of guide how we see different things happening in the world. All right. So for example, sometimes there's individuals who experience child abuse, so traumas as they're growing up. So they may hold a core belief that they are not worthy. So that contributes to poor self-esteem, that the world is unsafe and an unpredictable place, and therefore the future is pretty grim. Therefore, I should just live in the moment and be in the now. Tomorrow's problems are tomorrow's problems, and I'm just going to gamble because that's going to make me feel good. Therefore, these core beliefs really shape our thoughts, moods, feelings, and our behavior in the individual, right? So for example, an individual who's experienced abuse as a child, they hold these core beliefs, and gambling on sports betting is a very present focused behavior where they get to forget about the past. They can just focus on the game and not worry about the future. And maybe they can do something about their self-esteem if they win, right? So that's the kind of basics of that thing. And the image comes, by the way, from Wikipedia because it's always helpful. Oh, wait, what did I have there? All right, so this is a classic CBT model where it's big C, little b. So in terms of thoughts, cognitions versus behavior. So kind of just to give you an example, you're sitting at home one night, you're watching TV and you hear this noise coming from the kitchen. Tell me what it is. Did you hear that? Did you hear that noise? What is that? Mute yourself, throw it in the chat, but what's that noise?
Something breaking or silverware falling.
Something silverware falling, right? What's your attribution about why it fell? My 6-year-old, right? That's Emily, right? Some people might say that, you know, darn cat, you know, right? So that the thought is, sorry, I'm trying to get past that. So some thought might be the damn cat, right? And so if we have that damn cat, then your feelings, or it's your 6-year-old, right? Is that feeling of annoyance, right? And then you're in the other room and you're watching TV and you're like, all right, I'll just clean it up later, right? But what if your house got broken into a month ago? It's the same situation, but how we think about it changes. What could that be now, given that I was just broken into a month ago? Might it be an intruder? Right? It's glass breaking. Someone's trying to break in my house. So what are your thoughts, emotions, and feelings then? Right? You're grabbing the baseball bat or you're running and calling 911. I'm not safe. Right? You're having all this, your heart is just going like this. Right? All those things are happening. Right? So sometimes our past has that influence. So we have to kind of understand that within our clients. All right. The CBT model for substance use disorders and gambling actually can be really conceptualized more B and less C, a lot more behavior, because gambling behavior and substance abuse is a learned behavior. Generally speaking, we do not come out of our mother's belly gambling, aside from this one little instance, right? Here we have this little headline, right? The woman actually gave birth on the casino floor. But generally speaking, that's not it. It's a learned behavior. You know, so initially gambling is, you go gamble. This is the slot machine of an example. By the way, there's also this sound that happens. Right? And that turns me into a happy person. And you do that over and over and over, and learning occurs by those consequences, right? I'm not sure, I don't have any of the apps on my phone for sports betting, but I wonder if they make noises when you win your bet. I bet there is some sort of noise. If someone knows, please pipe up, but all that. So gambling then over time, you do that, and it actually kind of becomes, right? A gambling disorder emerges within the environment, and the context that cues and triggers the behaviors drive that behavior. The thoughts of winning, the negative affect by fighting with my spouse. I need to go self-regulate a little bit, so I'm going to go sit at the slot machines. Or if I'm a sports bettor, I'm bored and I need some excitement, so I'm going to bet on tonight's game because I don't have anything else to do. I had a gambling client who used to go over to his spouse and say, "Hey, honey, what are we doing tonight? Anything happening? Are we going to go do something or anything?" And she'd be like, "Nah, we're just hanging out." And he'd go downstairs in the basement, take out his phone, make a bunch of bets, and then start watching games. But meanwhile, if his partner said, "Oh, we're having dinner with the Smiths," then he wouldn't bet that night, right? So that's sort of how boredom was a big trigger for this individual, all right? So it's really maintained by these thought patterns and these cognitive processes, and sometimes our emotional states. Advertising that we see, we know with sports betting, the advertising really goes far, all right? So our primary task during CBT for gambling disorder is really to identify what I call the antecedents, which you guys may use as triggers and cues, and determinants of gambling behavior. So what specific needs is gambling being used to meet, right? Is it to address boredom, to address negative affect and to self-regulate that? And we typically do what's called a functional analysis where we look at, triggers, the behavior, and then the consequences. And sometimes the consequences become our triggers, right? They feel the money pressure. They've lost a lot of money and they don't know how to win it back or earn it back. And the best way to do it is to make another bet. And then what we do once we have a good understanding of the person's pattern, we can look at the antecedents and say, are there ways that we can rearrange the environment to decrease the likelihood of triggers occurring in the environment, right? So decrease those triggers. Getting off the mailing list used to be the way, right? Getting off the email list, the free slot play, things like that. But there's some triggers we can't remove. So let's say arguing with my spouse, right? Unless I get a divorce and completely remove them from the situation, which many people don't want to do, but they're still arguing with their spouse, they go gamble just to self-regulate, or they gamble. I've had several clients who gamble in means to get attention from their spouse. They're causing problems so that their spouse will then have to pay attention to them. All right. I've had several clients who that was a situation that was very dysfunctional, and it's like a really weird pattern, right? But for them, that was functional because their spouse was completely neglecting and ignoring them. And so they figured if they created a worse enough situation that the spouse would finally have to pay attention. If their financial life was in ruins, the spouse would do that. So then we have to, if we can't rearrange that environment, we have to develop effective coping skills for responding to those triggers. That's CBT in a nutshell, right? That's the basics of what we do, generally speaking. There's also, I want to say, just to give a caveat and a shout out, there is a straight up cognitive treatment for gambling disorder that's like Bob Lasor's approach, which really focuses on irrational beliefs and maladaptive thoughts, where like my lucky rabbit's foot and things like that. And so that's a straight up cognitive work that does work, but it takes some time to work. And so the cognitive behavioral therapy that I'm really steeped in and that I use predominantly is this much more behaviorally based, where we're looking at the functional analysis and then looking at coping skills and rearranging the environment. All right. So in these situations, first off, these are the things I've highlighted in red are sort of where the nuances really come into play as we deal with sports betting compared to individuals who are not our sports bettors. So like identifying triggers is very different, in the sense that the triggers themselves are somewhat different. And then also we'll talk about coping with cravings and how that's going to be a little bit different in sports wagering, cognitive restructuring, so the irrational beliefs or maladaptive thoughts, also stimulus control. So like rearranging the environment so you don't come in contact with the cues is also somewhat different because this is all on our phone. All right. The other things are pretty much, these are the other skill building that's common in CBT. There's really no real big differences between what you do with a person with a slot play versus someone who's a sports bettor. So I'm not going to walk through the ones that are in the black font. All right. I can do a little pitch for my NCPG 2 hours CBT 101 primer, where we're going to go through all these sorts of things if you happen to be in Boston. All right. So identifying triggers, how is that different for sports bettors? The triggers are different. So the common triggers are wagering inducement, the advertisements, sports reload, bonus up to $250 for existing customers only, right? So this is, an advertisement that you would see that would pop up on your phone, or maybe you get it as a text message, right? So that's why lots of individuals with sports wagering, gambling problems, they bet across multiple platforms because they want to get these offers. All right. Seasonal events like the NCAA tournament, right? Those are big triggers. Super Bowl, things like that. Baseball season, they're a big baseball fanatic, right? All right, next up is TV advertisements. You cannot watch a sporting event now without seeing this in any way. Yes, Carol has a copy of this presentation, and she can share it with everybody who's on the signed up for the thing. So you can definitely have it. Sometimes also just straight up boredom. Sitting around, like my client who used to ask his wife what's going on. If there's nothing going on, boom, they're going to go make some bets, right? Hanging out with friends, their social network is gambling. Being around those sorts of things. All right. So there's some research around this stuff too. So there's a lot of this research actually comes out of Australia, where they've had sports wagering for a much longer duration than we've had here in the US. And there's also better funding there a little bit. So there's some studies of sport wagering advertisements, and studies there find that exposure to gambling promotions during a televised sporting event encourage gambling intentions. And we know that when people intend to do things, then they actually follow up to do that. And that the gamblers who measured higher on the PGSI, so the Problem Gambling Severity Index, higher scores indicate generally greater gambling problems, are more likely to be exposed to these promotions because they're watching more sports. So if you're watching sports, you're going to, I can't tell you how many sports ads I saw last night watching the Blues, right? Think about it, right? And also during the game, they even talk about the odds. You know, I also listen to sports talk radio on my way home from work because I like some mindless things to listen to. And, you know, at the end of my ride, just the way at times the guys are always end up doing these parlay bets that they take with each other to advertise the Bailey sports books over at the Casino Queen or the DraftKings sports book, right? And then they keep a running tally across the week about who won how much money. And actually, most of the time, these guys lose money over the week. But yet there's these ways of, I'm hearing that every day, right? And if I'm a sports gambler, I'm going to be listening to the radio or going on YouTube and watching the handicappers. And by the way, the ads then, if you watch the handicappers, are all sportsbook ads, right? And then when I watch them, I view them favorably. I'm interested in the products, and then I'm willing to use them. So these promotions can really trigger gambling behavior, right? And they can get in the way of the recovery for our clients, right? Other things that go on, there's another study, they looked at these materials at different things like bonus bets, money back guarantees, cash deposits into your account. And those types of things were led to greater impulsive in-game betting, which was then associated with gambling problems, all right? Then there's another study that actually looked at the gambling behavior that was recorded in the app, because these apps record everything. And you can actually, there's ways to get feedback on your gambling behavior. And so if you're working with a client, I'd actually have them go into their app and pull their gambling behavior data. And it can show you how many wagers you've made over the last month, your net result and things like that. And that's good feedback for your clients, for them to see. And you can use that in the context of a motivational interview. But the inducements that had risk minimization, like the risk-free bets, actually generated greater physiological arousal than advertisements that were about odds boosters or $5 free play, things like that. The risk-free bets were the things that really got people's attention and were especially sort of luring for the people who had a gambling disorder. Along those sorts of things. All right. Yeah. So ESPN has a 1-hour program. HBO also just did Wild Water Sports or something like that. The Brett Gumbel special back in January, February, they had a sports wagering thing that also kind of can give you, and they talk also about suicide and its relationship to sports wagering, which is I have not even touched on, which is a whole nother sort of dynamic that if I had more time, we could spend some time talking about, because suicide is also just another issue, especially because individuals who engage in some sports wagering and have gambling problems tend to be a little bit more impulsive. And we know that impulsivity is associated with suicide attempts along those lines. All right. Also, another thing is just the wanting that excitement. And, they're going to watch these sports anyway. Let's just up it a little bit. I'm going to watch the Cardinals anyways. Why don't I make some in-game bets that something's going to happen? Also, social media posts by other gamblers. This is one I found on Reddit on their sports betting, community. And the title of the bet is "What a Night" by this guy with this little marker here called YOLO. Right, you only live once. So he bet on the Celtics, $650. Ouch, a lot of money, right? But he won. He won $1,500, and he also bet on the Blues last night. $150.01. I don't know why he bet 151, right? The odds were plus 760. So he won $1,200, almost $1,300 there. Would that make me feel like I might want to gamble? Would that sort of be a piece for your client? All right. And there's stuff on Twitter, there's stuff on Instagram. I mean, there's TikTok. All these things, you can find all this stuff. And do you think that actually contributes to someone potentially developing a gambling problem? Maybe, right? At least it encouraged them. It's like, oh, that's easy money. I want to, I can do that. I can make that sort of money. That's real attractive. Because people with sports betting many of them are in this to try to make money. They talk about it. And we can talk a little bit if we have time at the end about sort of what are some of the healthy ways that some people sort of approach that versus unhealthy ways. Next up is coping with cravings. You know, cravings are a normative experience for individuals after they quit gambling or any sort of substance use, right? Cravings are a result of when a rewarding learned behavior no longer occurs. Your brain is saying, hey, we used to do that thing. Let's do it again. That was fun, right? And it's saying, let's what happened. Let's do this again. It was fun. Let's do it. And so the frequency and intensity of cravings, I like the word dissipate because it just kind of melts away over time as you get further and further from that last gambling experience. Your brain starts to learn that this isn't going on. And I really like to try to externalize that with clients when I'm talking about craving. It's your brain. It's not you. It's just your brain has fallen into this habitual pattern and it's saying, let's do this again. Like, how come we're not doing this? So you just got to tell your brain no. So I externalize it a little bit. All right. So cravings are a little bit different in terms of what brings out that craving and that urge or the desire. There's so much advertising. It's like your client has to give up watching sports, but everybody they know watches sports. How's that going to work? Versus when they give up, you know, going to the casino and the sports and the slot play, that's a very isolated one-on-one activity, generally speaking, with our clients, right? So they don't have to give up friends. They don't have to they give up an activity they like to do, but they don't have to give up an activity they do with friends. Versus if they, you know, want to really get through these cravings, they kind of have to give up watching sports for a little while. And then when they do go back, those cravings are going to come back, right? So ways to cope with cravings is really to get involved in another distracting activity, set a timer. All right, put a timeout on your phone, go into the responsible gaming feature on your app, on your phone, and time it out. So that way you can't get into it. That's a really good use of the timeout feature on there, and just say, okay, I have this craving to bet. I'm going to put a 20-minute timer on here because most cravings usually dissipate within 20 minutes. So I'm going to use the timeout feature. That's a nice harm reduction sort of approach. Ideally, we are getting our clients to abstinence, but sometimes we have to work with moderation, and moderation is an acceptable treatment goal. All right. So that timeout feature can be really helpful. All right. It's, you know, talk it through with social support. What's really interesting, what we know about sort of, and I have a grad student who's doing it, her dissertation is around craving and disclosing craving to others. You have to have a social support network that's going to tolerate you disclosing that you're craving. Because sometimes you disclose it to somebody and they're like, oh no, you're going to gamble. Don't do it. Like, and it's a huge sort of actually punishing social interaction. Then people are not going to want to disclose craving. So you have to figure out who's the appropriate person for your client to disclose. So what we know is that someone who's generally supportive of that individual and somebody who's in recovery can kind of understand it, or somebody who's at least engaged in that activity, who uses substances or gambles, and can kind of understand that. And they're not like freaking out that you're just talking about it. All right. Maybe also a social support network that's open to the idea of moderation for you as a treatment goal. All right. So that sort of thing. We also want to engage in some sort of challenging your thoughts and things like that. All right. Cognitive restructuring. You know, individuals with gambling disorder have irrational beliefs or distorted thinking about gambling. You know, and the thing is, as your problem gets more severe, these distorted thinking gets much more intense. All right. And we're not sure whether it's a chicken and egg phenomena, but as people engage in treatment and treatment is working, severity of gambling problems go down, and so do these irrational beliefs. All right. So I'm about to hit a heater is a common irrational belief that an individual is at. What defines that you're about to hit a heater? Like, what are the signs? What's the objective proof that you're going to hit a heater, right? That means I'm going to get a hot streak. I'm feeling lucky. I've never understood with my gambling clients how they know when they're going to feel lucky. Like, tell me. I'd love to know that so I could then objectively prove that I'm feeling lucky. Today, I should go buy a lottery ticket, right? I know the Sporting KC is going to win. They're going to cover the spread. So I just know it based on my expertise and my knowledge, right? They can't lose to this other team. They're terrible. The New England Revolution, they're terrible. They're a bad team, right? So, and then they have that beliefs about special knowledge and expertise, right? And that's the hard part to take away from our clients with sports betting, is they really do believe that they're special, all right? But their past behavior has proved that they aren't special and they're not an expert. Well, I just got unlucky that, that was just a fluke goal. The pitcher made a mistake and he hit a homer. No, you're just not very good at this. All right. Stimulus control is basically the idea that the closer we come to an addictive object, the harder it is for us to control our behavior. All right. And so that's really important component of stimulus control is limiting the environment so that we don't get close to the addictive object. And so since this thing is on our phone, in 3 taps or 4 taps, I've made a bet. That's so close and so easy. So we have to think about ways to put up sort of roadblocks for our clients, okay? So we have to really think about ways to identify some safe choices that'll get us off the path of gambling. So one of the things that we do is the blocking software. So that limits access on your phone, but you have to put it on all your devices. Bet Blocker is free, by the way. The other ones all cost some money, and they cost money per device, so it gets expensive pretty quick. All right. These things are not 100% like effective and foolproof, but the research really says it makes it much more of a hassle for people. It blocks all the big ones. And so therefore someone has to really go digging and finding one that's not blocked. And it's a real hassle to do that, right? You can also set various durations of how long things will be blocked on your phone. So you can get Bet Blocker and say, okay, I want it to be blocked for the next month. And you can't go in and change it once you set it. All right. And so you can do that sort of thing. You can do a day, a week, a month, a year. And the thing is research has shown, they've done some consumer surveys, and only about 50% of people with a gambling disorder are aware of this technology. So we got to really tell our clients about it and encourage them to use it. And that these things, the software generally works best when someone's engaged in treatment. It's a part of treatment. It's not the treatment only. Although there are people who engage in self-change who may be using this, and that we have to be open to that. All right. So, and it does also not block access to gambling treatment resources. It can distinguish between what's a gambling website that's all about making bets versus a website that's offering resources and help. So you don't have to be worried that they're cut off as it's related to that. All right. So I heard it still works, but I haven't gone and I haven't downloaded it recently. But the last time I checked, let me say that, but I haven't checked recently. One drawback is you have to pay per device if you're paying for the other ones. All right, so at this point, we have concluded our conversation today. I just want to say thank you. I also want to say the reason I don't engage in sports racing is I'm a big Phillies fan. That's where I grew up in Philadelphia, and they're a terrible team to bet on. They're just a terrible team in general. And so I don't engage in sports wagering really because it's not a winning proposition for me the times I've tried. So my contact information, and I've really enjoyed my time with you today. Please hit me up with some questions or comments. I'd love to hear some feedback as well. And I hope that you don't have too many clients who face this issue, but we know the reality is that you will have some. Anybody have any burning questions of things I didn't cover? Questions about suicide or other thoughts? I'm getting some thank yous. I appreciate that. We do have a little time for some Q&A. Wow. Well, that being said, I think we should call it a day. Thank you so much for your attention today, and have a very good rest of your day, your afternoon. Coming into a long weekend, hopefully people have some nice plans to recharge their batteries. I want to say as frontline clinicians, you guys have to really please take care of yourself, engage in self-care. It's very hard out there right now, and we really need to take care of ourselves so that we can be in a place where we can then help others. And so I hope you have some restorative plans for the weekend, and get out there and know that there's a lot of people struggling, and that therapists are people who need to help people, but we also need to take care of ourselves too, so that we can be in a place to do that. So I hope you are, and that's just my message about self-care, because it's so important. So
Jeremiah, thank you so very much.
You're welcome. All right. And then I think Chad and Carol will take care of the CEs for folks who need it. And they have a process for that. So at this point, I think we're all free to go. Carol, I'd love to just touch base with you afterwards for 1 minute.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.